There's something almost unbelievable about what I'm about to tell you. Picture this. January 16th, 1945. The most powerful man in Europe, hiding underground like a frightened animal. Above him, Berlin is being torn apart by Soviet artillery. Below, in a concrete tomb 28 feet beneath the earth, Adolf Hitler begins what will become the longest, most desperate 105 days of his life. This isn't the story of Hitler's rise. You've heard that before. This is about his fall. This is about what happens when a man who convinced an entire nation he was invincible finally runs out of places to hide. It's hard to imagine, isn't it? The man who once stood before hundreds of thousands of cheering Germans, now reduced to pacing the cramped corridors of an underground bunker. The Führerbunker wasn't just Hitler's final refuge. It was his tomb, and he knew it. Let me paint you a picture of this place. 18 small rooms, concrete walls 3 feet thick, air that reeked of diesel fumes and human sweat. The bunker was supposed to be temporary, just until the situation improved. But as the days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, it became clear to everyone except Hitler himself that there would be no improvement, only ending. The irony is almost painful. Here was a man who built his entire identity on being larger than life, now trapped in a space barely large enough for life at all. The bunker was damp, constantly damp. Water seeped through the walls because it was built below Berlin's water table. Can you imagine? The man who promised Germans a 1,000-year Reich, slowly going mad in a concrete box that couldn't even keep the groundwater out. But Hitler wasn't alone down there. Oh no, he surrounded himself with the last of his true believers. Joseph Goebbels, his propaganda minister, moved his entire family into the bunker. Think about that for a moment. Goebbels brought his wife Magda and their 6 children underground to die with their Führer. That's not loyalty. That's madness masquerading as devotion. Then there was Martin Bormann. Now, Bormann, he was different. While others were there out of fanatical loyalty or fear, Bormann was there because he understood power. He controlled access to Hitler. If you wanted to speak to the Führer, you went through Bormann. Even in that cramped underground world, he maintained his position as gatekeeper. Some men accumulate power by building empires. Bormann did it by controlling a single doorway. And Eva Braun, Hitler's longtime companion, though he'd kept her hidden from the German public for years, Eva was there by choice, and her choice tells us something deeply disturbing about human psychology. She could have left. She could have fled to safety. Instead, she chose to descend into that concrete hell because she loved a monster. The bunker had all the luxuries Hitler demanded, of course. Furniture stolen from the Reich Chancellery above. Expensive paintings looted from across Europe. Even a telephone switchboard to maintain the illusion that he was still commanding a functioning army. But luxury can't disguise desperation. Can it? All those fine furnishings couldn't hide the fact that this was a mausoleum for a dying regime. You want to know what struck me most about those early days in the bunker? It wasn't the cramped conditions or the damp walls. It was the pretending. Everyone pretending that Germany was still winning the war. Everyone pretending that the Führer still had a master plan. Everyone pretending that somehow, miraculously, they would emerge victorious. But reality has a way of seeping through concrete walls, doesn't it? Just like that groundwater. To understand Hitler's final madness, you have to understand how he got there. This wasn't always a broken man hiding underground. Once upon a time, he was just another failed artist from Austria. Imagine that. The man who would terrorize the world started out getting rejected from art school. But oh, how he learned to perform. You've seen the footage, haven't you? Hitler at those massive rallies, commanding audiences of hundreds of thousands. The way he moved, the way he spoke. It was pure theater. And theater, as any actor will tell you, can become more real than reality itself. January 30th, 1933. That's when everything changed. That's when Hitler became Chancellor of Germany. Not through a dramatic coup or violent revolution, but through politics. Can you believe that? He talked his way into power. He used democracy to destroy democracy, and he did it so smoothly that millions of Germans actually thanked him for it. Here's what's truly chilling about Hitler's rise. He was incredibly good at reading people. He understood something that many politicians never grasp. People don't just want to be led. They want to be seduced. They want to believe they're part of something bigger than themselves. Hitler gave them that feeling, and in return, they gave him everything. The Enabling Act of 1933, for simple words that destroyed German democracy. It gave Hitler the power to pass laws without parliament, to rule by decree. And the German parliament voted for it. They literally voted to make themselves irrelevant. It's like watching someone hand over the keys to their own prison cell. But Hitler was smart. He didn't become a dictator overnight. Oh no, that would have shocked people. Instead, he did it gradually. First, he banned the Communist Party. Well, they were radical troublemakers, weren't they? Then the Social Democrats. They were standing in the way of national unity. Then all the other parties. Until suddenly, there was only one party left. His party. You know what the scariest part is? It worked. The German people, by and large, supported him. Not because they were forced to, but because he gave them what they wanted to hear. He told them they were special. He told them they deserved better. He told them their problems were someone else's fault. And they believed him. The propaganda machine that Goebbels built. It was like nothing the world had ever seen. Every movie, every radio broadcast, every newspaper article. All of it designed to reinforce one simple message. Hitler is Germany and Germany is Hitler. After a while, even Hitler started to believe his own propaganda. That's when a politician becomes truly dangerous. When he starts believing his own lies. By 1939, Hitler had convinced himself he was invincible. Why wouldn't he? Everything he touched turned to gold. Germany's economy had recovered. The military was rebuilt. The people adored him. When he invaded Poland on September 1st, 1939, he probably thought it would be just another easy victory. He was wrong. But by then, it was too late to stop the machine he'd built. Blitzkrieg, lightning war. God, Hitler loved that phrase. It made warfare sound almost elegant, swift, decisive, clean. For a while, it actually worked that way. Poland fell in weeks. Denmark, Norway, Holland, Belgium. They toppled like dominoes. And then came France. June 14th, 1940. German tanks rolling through Paris. Can you imagine the feeling in that bunker as they watched those newsreels? Hitler must have felt like Caesar entering Rome. The greatest military power in Europe, humbled in just 6 weeks. At that moment, Hitler probably believed he really was chosen by destiny. But here's the thing about lightning. It's brilliant, but it's brief. The Battle of Britain changed everything. For the first time, Hitler met an enemy that wouldn't break. The Royal Air Force. Those pilots were something else. Day after day, night after night, they rose to meet the German bombers. And slowly, gradually, they started winning. August 25th, 1940. That's when British bombers first hit Berlin. Hitler was furious. How dare they? How dare these stubborn islanders attack the capital of the Reich? But you know what that bombing raid really did? It shattered the illusion of German invincibility. If British planes could reach Berlin, then nowhere was safe. Hitler's response was typically emotional. Instead of focusing on destroying British airfields and radar stations, he ordered the Luftwaffe to bomb London, to terrorize civilians. It was satisfying, perhaps, but strategically disastrous. While German bombs fell on London's East End, the RAF rebuilt its strength. The Battle of Britain was Hitler's first real defeat, but he couldn't admit it. So he did what he always did when reality disappointed him. He changed the subject. June 22nd, 1941. Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. This was Hitler's masterpiece, his magnum opus. 3.5 million German soldiers, supported by tanks and aircraft, smashing into Stalin's unprepared forces. In the first weeks, it looked like another lightning victory. But Russia isn't France. Russia is vast. Russia is patient. And Russian winters have been destroying invading armies for centuries. Napoleon learned that lesson. Apparently, Hitler thought he was smarter than Napoleon. For a while, German forces advanced like a knife through butter. Millions of Soviet soldiers were captured or killed. The Wehrmacht reached the suburbs of Moscow, the outskirts of Leningrad. Victory seemed inevitable. Then winter came early. I want you to imagine what it was like for those German soldiers. They'd been told they'd be home by Christmas. Instead, they found themselves freezing in inadequate uniforms, hundreds of miles from supply lines, fighting an enemy that seemed to multiply no matter how many you killed. And then came Stalingrad. Stalingrad. Even saying the name feels heavy, doesn't it? This wasn't just a battle. It was a meat grinder that consumed armies. Hitler had promised the German people a quick victory. Instead, he gave them months of house-to-house fighting in a ruined city that became a symbol of everything wrong with his war. The battle began in August 1942. By winter, the German Sixth Army was trapped, surrounded, starving. Soviet forces had counterattacked with a skill and ferocity that shocked the German high command. Suddenly, the hunters had become the hunted. General Paulus, commanding the Sixth Army, begged Hitler for permission to break out while there was still time. Hitler's response? Fight to the last man and the last bullet. Easy words to say from a comfortable bunker hundreds of miles away. Not so easy for the soldiers freezing and dying in Stalingrad's ruins. February 2nd, 1943, the Sixth Army surrendered. Of the original 220,000 German soldiers who entered Stalingrad, fewer than 90,000 survived to become prisoners. And of those prisoners, well, most never saw Germany again. That was the moment, I think, when Hitler's war became unwinnable. Everything after Stalingrad was just delay, postponement of the inevitable. But Hitler couldn't see it, or wouldn't see it. The man who had once been so good at reading the mood of a crowd had completely lost touch with reality. By 1943, even Goebbels' propaganda couldn't hide the truth from the German people. The casualty lists grew longer. The rationing grew tighter. The bombing raids grew more frequent. And in his various headquarters, Hitler grew more isolated, more paranoid, more desperate. But the worst was yet to come. December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor. Hitler actually declared that one of the happiest days of his life when he heard the news. Japan had brought America into the war, and Hitler, in a moment of spectacular stupidity, declared war on the United States as well. Think about that decision for a moment. Germany was already fighting Britain and the Soviet Union. Now Hitler decided to add America to his list of enemies. The country with the world's largest economy, virtually unlimited natural resources, and an ocean protecting it from German attack. It's almost like he wanted to lose. But that was Hitler by 1941. The early successes had convinced him he was infallible. Any advisor who questioned his decisions was dismissed as a defeatist. Any general who suggested strategic retreat was branded a coward. Hitler had created a system where no one dared tell him the truth. And the truth was that Germany couldn't win a war against half the world. By 1944, the walls were closing in from every direction. The Red Army was advancing from the east, having liberated most of Eastern Europe. Anglo-American forces had landed in Italy and France. German cities were being bombed around the clock. And still, Hitler insisted that victory was possible. The July 20th plot. That's when we really see how far Hitler had fallen. His own officers tried to kill him. These weren't foreign agents or resistance fighters. These were German army officers, men who had sworn loyalty to the fatherland, who decided that Hitler had become such a threat to Germany that he had to die. The bomb nearly got him. If Colonel Stauffenberg had placed it just a few feet closer to Hitler's position, well, history might have been very different. But Hitler survived, and his response was typical. Instead of asking why his own officers wanted him dead, he ordered mass executions. Anyone even remotely connected to the plot was tortured and killed. By January 1945, Hitler's world had shrunk to the size of a bunker. Above ground, Berlin was being systematically destroyed by Allied bombing. Soviet forces were fighting in the suburbs. American and British armies were crossing the Rhine. The Third Reich, which was supposed to last 1,000 years, was collapsing after just 12. And in that bunker, Surrounded by the last of his followers, Hitler was losing his mind. The man who had once commanded millions now spent his days moving colored pins on maps, commanding armies that no longer existed, issuing orders to generals who had been dead for months. Reality and fantasy had become completely blurred in his mind. Eva Braun later described those early days in the bunker as unreal. Everyone going through the motions of normal life while the world ended above their heads. Hitler still held his daily military briefings, still raged at his subordinates, still planned impossible counterattacks. But it was all theater now. Deadly, tragic theater. The most heartbreaking part? There were still people who believed in him. Goebbels' children, playing in the bunker corridors while their parents planned to murder them rather than let them live in a world without Hitler. SS guards who stood at attention while Berlin burned. Secretaries who took dictation for orders that would never be carried out. Loyalty, it turns out, can be just as destructive as hatred. You want to know what daily life was like in that bunker? Imagine being trapped in a submarine that will never surface. The air recycling system broke down regularly, leaving everyone gasping in the stale, diesel-tinged atmosphere. The generator that powered the lights failed constantly, plunging them into darkness that felt like a preview of eternity. Hitler's daily routine became a parody of leadership. He would wake around noon, when he could sleep at all. The tremor in his left hand, which had been developing for years, was now so severe that he had to support it with his right hand during meetings. His back was hunched. His face had taken on a grayish pallor that no amount of artificial lighting could hide. But the worst part wasn't his physical deterioration. It was watching his mind fragment in real time. He would spend hours staring at maps, moving non-existent armies around like pieces on a chessboard. "Steiner's attack will change everything," he would mumble, referring to an SS general whose force consisted of barely 1,000 men facing tens of thousands of Soviet troops. When his staff gently suggested that Steiner's attack had failed, Hitler would fly into rages that could be heard throughout the bunker. The people around him, God, what must it have been like for them? Imagine watching someone you've followed for years, someone you've believed in completely, slowly disintegrate before your eyes. Some, like Goebbels, seemed to find it almost romantic. The twilight of the gods, they called it. Others, like the secretaries and adjutants, just looked terrified. Traudl Junge, one of Hitler's secretaries, later described the atmosphere as unreal. During the day, they would hear the constant thunder of Soviet artillery getting closer and closer. At night, the bunker would shake from the impact of bombs landing directly overhead. And through it all, Hitler insisted that everything was going according to plan. The meals in the bunker became increasingly surreal. Hitler, a vegetarian, would sit at the head of the table picking at his food while discussing plans for rebuilding Berlin after the war. After the war, can you imagine? Soviet tanks were literally fighting in the streets above them, and he was talking about post-war reconstruction projects. Eva Braun tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy. She organized little parties with the secretaries, playing music and dancing while the world ended above their heads. There's something both admirable and deeply tragic about that, isn't there? A woman trying to preserve humanity in the most inhuman circumstances imaginable. But even Eva couldn't hide the reality forever. The bunker was running out of food. The water supply was unreliable. Medical supplies were nearly exhausted. And every day, the circle of controlled territory above them grew smaller. The radio reports became Hitler's lifeline to his delusions. He would sit for hours listening to fragmentary transmissions from German units that might or might not still exist. When the reports contradicted his fantasies, he would accuse the radio operators of defeatism. When they confirmed his hopes, he would seize on them as proof that victory was still possible. Martin Bormann, ever the political animal, used Hitler's deteriorating mental state to consolidate his own power. Any order that came from the Führer now had to be interpreted by Bormann. Any visitor who wanted to see Hitler had to be approved by Bormann. In the final weeks, Bormann wasn't just controlling access to Hitler, he was controlling Hitler himself. And through it all, the artillery kept getting closer. April 22nd, 1945. That's the day something inside Hitler finally broke completely. It was during his daily military briefing when he learned that SS Obergruppenführer Felix Steiner had failed to launch the attack that Hitler believed would save Berlin. The explosion of rage that followed. Witnesses described it as unlike anything they had ever seen from Hitler before. He screamed that he had been betrayed by everyone. The army had betrayed him. The SS had betrayed him. The German people themselves had betrayed him. For 2 hours, he ranted and raved while his staff stood in stunned silence. And then, suddenly, he stopped. He slumped into his chair and said something that no one in that room ever expected to hear. The war is lost. But if you think that moment of clarity brought any kind of peace or sanity, you'd be wrong. Instead, it seemed to push Hitler into an even deeper madness. If he couldn't win, then everyone should die with him. Germany didn't deserve to survive if it couldn't secure his victory. That's when the orders went out. Destroy everything. Every bridge, every factory, every food depot. Leave nothing for the advancing Allies. It was called the Nero Decree, and it would have condemned millions of German civilians to starvation. Thank God there were still some German officials with enough sanity to ignore it. Heinrich Himmler, the man who had built the SS into Hitler's personal army. The man who had organized the Holocaust with bureaucratic efficiency. Even Himmler was trying to negotiate peace with the Allies behind Hitler's back. When Hitler found out, you could hear his scream throughout the bunker. Himmler, der true Heinrich, faithful Heinrich, as Hitler had called him. If Himmler could betray him, then no one could be trusted. Hermann Göring, the head of the Luftwaffe, tried to take control of the government, claiming that Hitler was no longer capable of leading. Göring, who had been with Hitler since the early days of the Nazi Party, who had been designated as Hitler's successor, even he was abandoning the sinking ship. One by one, the rats were fleeing. And in that bunker, listening to reports of each new betrayal, Hitler's paranoia reached heights that would have been comical if they weren't so tragic. He began to suspect everyone. The guards were plotting against him. The secretaries were spying for the Allies. Even Eva might be planning to poison him. The man who had once commanded the loyalty of millions was now afraid of the handful of people trapped underground with him. But perhaps the most heartbreaking betrayal was yet to come. The German people themselves. The people who had cheered him in the streets, who had supported his rise to power, who had followed him into the abyss of war. They were done with him. In Berlin streets, white flags were appearing in windows. Civilians were fleeing westward, desperate to surrender to the Americans or British rather than face the Soviet army. And why shouldn't they? Hitler had promised them victory and given them only destruction. He had promised them glory and delivered only death. The man who had built his entire identity on being loved by the German people was finally facing the truth. They didn't love him anymore. They feared him. They blamed him. They wanted him gone. And in that concrete tomb beneath Berlin, surrounded by the last of his true believers, Adolf Hitler began to plan his final act. April 29, 1945, one day before the end of everything. And what does Hitler choose to do? He gets married. I know. It sounds almost absurd, doesn't it? The world is literally exploding above their heads. Soviet soldiers are fighting block by block through Berlin, and Hitler decides this is the perfect time for a wedding ceremony. But maybe it makes sense in a twisted way. After years of keeping Eva Braun hidden from the German public, after years of maintaining the fiction that he was married only to Germany, maybe Hitler finally wanted to give her the one thing she had always asked for: his name. The ceremony was held in the bunker's map room. A minor city official named Walter Wagner was brought in to perform the service. Can you imagine being that man? Called into a bunker to marry Adolf Hitler while the world ended outside? Wagner was probably the last person to see Hitler act anything like a normal human being. Eva wore a black silk dress, her best dress, saved for special occasions. There weren't many special occasions in that bunker. Hitler wore his usual uniform, but he had it cleaned for the ceremony. Small gestures, but they matter, don't they? Even in hell, people try to maintain some dignity. The wedding was brief. No guests except Goebbels and Bormann as witnesses. No flowers except for the withered remnants in Eva's bouquet. No celebration except for a small toast with champagne that had been saved in the bunker's dwindling supplies. After the ceremony, Eva signed the marriage certificate as Eva Hitler, née Braun. Such a simple thing, a signature on a piece of paper. But she had waited years for the right to write those words. And she only got to use that name for 24 hours. That same night, Hitler dictated his final will and testament to his secretary, Traudl Junge. Have you ever read it? It's one of the most chilling documents in history, not because of what it says, but because of what it reveals about Hitler's complete inability to accept responsibility for anything. Even facing death, even with his empire in ruins around him, Hitler blamed everyone but himself. The Jews had started the war. The German people had failed him. His generals had betrayed him. Never once did he acknowledge that his own decisions, his own madness, his own evil had brought Germany to this point. "I die with a joyful heart," he dictated, "knowing that our people and our Reich will one day rise again." Joyful heart. The man had just condemned his wife to death, his closest followers to suicide, and his country to occupation, and he claimed to have a joyful heart. But the most revealing part of the will wasn't what Hitler said about the war or Germany's future. It was what he said about Eva. "In death, she will accompany me of her own free will, of her own free will." As if joining him in suicide was a romantic gesture rather than the final act of a shared delusion. The cyanide capsules had been a source of anxiety for Hitler. He didn't trust them, didn't trust anything anymore, so he decided to test one. On Blondie, his beloved German shepherd. Can you imagine that scene? Hitler calling his dog over, probably scratching behind her ears one last time, then forcing a poison capsule down her throat. Watching as Blondie convulsed and died while he sat there, satisfied that the poison worked. That might be the most purely evil thing Hitler did in those final days. Not the Holocaust, that was carried out by others at a distance. Not the war, that was fought by soldiers he never met. But personally murdering his own dog to test poison for his suicide? That was pure, intimate cruelty. Dr. Werner Hasse, the bunker's physician, confirmed that the cyanide was effective. Hitler now knew exactly how he would die. A bite on the poison capsule, followed immediately by a gunshot to the head. He wasn't taking any chances of survival. The final preparations were complete. The marriage certificate was signed. The will was dictated. The poison was tested. All that remained was the waiting. And in that concrete tomb beneath Berlin, as Soviet artillery grew closer and closer, Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun spent their last night as husband and wife, preparing to die together as they had lived together, in the shadow of madness. Hitler woke late, as had become his habit. But this wasn't just another day of delusional planning and rage-filled conferences. This was the day he had chosen to end it all. And maybe for the first time in months, he seemed almost calm. The morning military briefing was surreal even by bunker standards. Soviet forces were now fighting literally overhead. You could hear individual gunshots, not just artillery. The Red Army was in the government district, probably no more than a few hundred yards from the bunker entrance. And Hitler was asking about reinforcements that everyone knew didn't exist. General Helmuth Weidling, the commander of Berlin's defenses, tried one last time to convince Hitler to attempt a breakout. There was still a narrow corridor to the west, he said. They might be able to reach German lines. Hitler listened politely, then dismissed the idea. He would not flee Berlin. He would not be captured alive. He would not become a trophy for Stalin. You know what's strange? In those final hours, some of the people in the bunker described Hitler as seeming almost relieved. The terrible burden of pretending he could still win, the exhausting effort of maintaining his delusions. Maybe it was finally too much even for him. The farewell began around noon. Hitler emerged from his private quarters and began shaking hands with everyone in the bunker. The guards, the secretaries, the communications officers. One by one, he took their hands and said goodbye. Traudl Junge later described the handshake as surprisingly gentle. Not the firm grip of a leader, but the soft touch of someone who was already halfway gone. His eyes, she said, looked empty, like looking into dark water. Eva was trying so hard to be brave. She had put on her best dress again, done her hair, even applied makeup, as if appearing beautiful would somehow make what was about to happen less horrific. She kissed the secretaries goodbye and told them to try to get out of Berlin, try to survive. Such simple words, but they carried the weight of everything left unsaid. Goebbels was there, of course, faithful to the end. He and his wife Magda had already decided they would follow their Führer into death, and they would take their 6 children with them. Think about that. 6 children, ranging in age from 4 to 12, condemned to die because their parents couldn't imagine a world without Hitler. Around 3:30 in the afternoon, Hitler and Eva retreated to his private study. They sat together on a small blue sofa, the same sofa where Hitler had spent countless hours planning military operations that would never succeed. Eva bit down on her cyanide capsule first. She died quickly, slumping against Hitler's shoulder. Hitler waited a moment, maybe to make sure the poison worked, maybe to say one final goodbye to the woman who had chosen to die with him. Then he bit his own capsule and, almost simultaneously, pressed his service pistol to his right temple and pulled the trigger. The gunshot echoed through the bunker's concrete corridors. Everyone knew what it meant. After 12 years of absolute power, after 6 years of World War, after 105 days in an underground tomb, Adolf Hitler was dead. The aftermath was chaos, but organized chaos. Hitler had left specific instructions for the disposal of his body. He was terrified of ending up like Mussolini, whose corpse had been hung upside down in a Milan public square for crowds to mock and spit on. Bormann and others carried the bodies up the emergency exit stairs to the Chancellery Garden. It was dangerous. Soviet snipers were active in the area, but they had their orders. They placed the bodies in a shell crater, doused them with gasoline from the bunker's emergency supplies, and set them on fire. As Berlin burned around them, as the Third Reich collapsed in rubble and smoke, the mortal remains of Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun were consumed by flames. The man who had promised to reshape the world in his image was reduced to ashes and scattered to the wind. But the horror wasn't over yet. I need to tell you about the children, because no story of those final days would be complete without them. Joseph and Magda Goebbels had brought their 6 children into the bunker. Helga, Hildegard, Helmut, Holdine, Hedwig, and Heidrun. Their names all started with H, for Hitler, of course. Even their children's names were a tribute to their Führer. These kids had been living in the bunker for weeks by the time Hitler died. Can you imagine what that was like for them? Helga, the oldest, was 12. Old enough to understand that something terrible was happening, but not old enough to understand why. The youngest, Heidrun, was only 4. To her, this was probably all just an adventure. Living underground, hearing loud noises, seeing all the adults looking worried. They played in the corridors. They ate their meals in the communal dining room. They did their lessons with their mother while their father planned propaganda campaigns for a war that was already lost. Normal childhood activities in the most abnormal circumstances imaginable. The bunker personnel were kind to them. Even SS guards would slip them extra rations or play games with them when time allowed. There's something deeply human about that, isn't it? Even in the depths of hell, people tried to preserve some innocence for these children. But Magda Goebbels had made her decision. When Hitler died, she would follow him, and she would take her children with her. May 1st, 1945, the day after Hitler's suicide, Magda Goebbels called her children together one last time. She told them they were going to play a game. They were going to take some medicine that would help them sleep, and when they woke up, everything would be better. One by one, she gave them each a cyanide capsule disguised as medicine. Bite down hard, she told them. It will taste bitter, but it will help you sleep. Helga, being the oldest, probably sensed something was wrong. The accounts suggest she fought against taking the poison, but she was 12 years old, and her mother was insistent. One by one, all 6 children died in their beds in that concrete tomb. Then Magda and Joseph went up to the garden above the bunker. Joseph shot his wife, then himself. The Goebbels family, an entire family, extinct because they couldn't imagine living in a world without Adolf Hitler. There were other suicides in the bunker that night. Hitler's bodyguard, several SS officers, people who had built their entire identities around serving the Führer and simply couldn't conceive of continuing without him. But others chose differently. The secretaries, the communication staff, many of the younger personnel. They tried to escape. Some made it out of Berlin. Some were captured by Soviet forces. A few even managed to reach Allied lines and survive the war. That difference between those who chose death and those who chose life, it tells us something profound about human nature, doesn't it? Even in the most extreme circumstances, even when surrounded by madness and despair, some people will always choose hope over surrender. News of Hitler's death spread through what remained of German forces like wildfire. But here's what's remarkable. It wasn't met with despair. It was met with something closer to relief. For years, German soldiers had been dying for a man who viewed them as expendable. For years, German civilians had been suffering bombing raids and rationing for a leader who blamed them for his failures. For years, the entire German nation had been trapped in a war they couldn't win, led by a man who refused to let them surrender. Hitler's death broke that spell. Grand Admiral Karl Donitz, whom Hitler had named as his successor in his will, immediately began peace negotiations. Not because he was a humanitarian, but because he was sane. He could see what Hitler had refused to acknowledge. Germany was beaten, and continuing the fight would only mean more pointless death. May 8, 1945, Victory in Europe Day, the unconditional surrender of Nazi Germany. The war that Hitler had started with such confidence 6 years earlier was finally over. And with it died the dream of a 1,000-year Reich that had lasted exactly 12 years, 3 months, and 9 days. But what about the bunker itself? What happened to that concrete tomb that had housed the final act of Hitler's drama? The Soviets found it, of course. They poured through the abandoned corridors, photographing everything, collecting documents, trying to piece together exactly what had happened in those final days. Stalin, interestingly, seemed almost disappointed that Hitler had cheated him of a public trial and execution. For years, the Soviets claimed they had never found Hitler's body. They wanted to keep alive the possibility that he had somehow escaped, that he might still be plotting a return. It was useful propaganda, the idea that fascism might rise again if they weren't vigilant. But we know now what really happened. Hitler's charred remains were found by Soviet forces, identified through dental records, and secretly buried in East Germany. Years later, those remains were exhumed and completely destroyed. There is no grave for Adolf Hitler, no monument, no place for his followers to make pilgrimages. And maybe that's as it should be. The Nuremberg trials began just 6 months after Hitler's death. For the first time in history, the leaders of a nation were held accountable for crimes against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. The very concept of crimes against humanity was created specifically to deal with the horrors of the Nazi regime. But here's what struck me most about those trials: how ordinary the defendants looked. Without their uniforms, without their titles, without the pageantry of Nazi power, they just looked like tired, middle-aged men. It was hard to believe these were the people who had terrorized a continent. Hermann Göring, the highest-ranking Nazi to face trial, tried to maintain some dignity. He attempted to justify everything they had done, to argue that they were patriots serving their country. Right up until the end, he couldn't admit that what they had done was simply evil. Rudolf Hess, Hitler's former deputy, seemed to have lost his mind completely. He claimed not to remember large portions of his life, denied knowing about the Holocaust, acted like a man trying to escape into madness rather than face responsibility. But the most chilling testimony came from the lower-level officials, the bureaucrats who had organized the deportations, the administrators who had calculated the most efficient ways to kill millions of people, the clerks who had filed reports on genocide like they were filing tax returns. These weren't monsters, you see. They were ordinary people who had convinced themselves that evil was just another job to be done efficiently. In the years following the war, the Allies systematically destroyed the physical remnants of Nazi power. The Berghof, Hitler's mountain retreat, was blown up. The Reich Chancellery was demolished. Nazi monuments were torn down and their materials used to build schools and hospitals. But the bunker proved remarkably difficult to destroy. Those 3-foot-thick concrete walls that had protected Hitler from Allied bombs also protected the bunker from Allied demolition charges. Several attempts were made to completely destroy it, but the structure was simply too solid. So they did something else. They built over it, covered it with apartment buildings and parking lots, made it disappear not through destruction, but through normality. Today, if you visit the site in Berlin, there's just a small information plaque in a parking lot. Nothing dramatic, nothing memorable. Just a sign that says, essentially, here stood the bunker where Adolf Hitler spent his final days. It's perfect, really. The man who craved monuments and grand gestures, who wanted to be remembered for 1,000 years, reduced to a footnote on a parking lot sign. But let me tell you about a different group of children. Not the Goebbels children who died in that bunker, but the German children who survived the war and had to grow up in its aftermath. These kids had been raised on Nazi propaganda. They had been taught that Hitler was infallible, that Germany was destined to rule the world, that certain groups of people were subhuman. And then, suddenly, they learned it was all lies. Imagine being 8 or 10 years old and discovering that everything the adults had told you was wrong, that your heroes were criminals, that your country had committed unspeakable atrocities, that the man you had been taught to worship was one of history's greatest monsters. The Allied occupation forces faced an enormous challenge. How do you re-educate an entire generation? How do you teach children to think critically when they've been trained only to obey? How do you restore moral reasoning to minds that have been poisoned by propaganda? They started with the basics. They showed German children footage from the liberated concentration camps, not to traumatize them, but to help them understand the reality of what had been done in their name. Many of these children genuinely didn't know. Their parents hadn't told them. The newspapers hadn't reported it. Goebbels' propaganda machine had hidden the truth even from Germany's own people. New textbooks were written, textbooks that told the truth about German history, about the war, about the Holocaust. For the first time, German children learned about democracy, about human rights, about the value of individual conscience over blind obedience. It wasn't easy. Many adults resisted these changes. Some parents tried to maintain the old beliefs in private, teaching their children that the Allies were lying, that Hitler had been right all along. But most Germans, exhausted by war and horrified by the revelations of Nazi crimes, were ready for a new beginning. The children adapted more quickly than the adults, as children usually do. They learned to question authority. They learned to think for themselves. They learned that following orders is not an excuse for moral blindness. And those children grew up to build a very different Germany. A democratic Germany. A Germany that acknowledges its past honestly and works to ensure such horrors never happen again. Today, if you walk through Berlin, you'll see a thriving, democratic city. The Brandenburg Gate, which once stood at the heart of Hitler's capital, now symbolizes unity and freedom. The Reichstag, where German democracy was murdered in 1933, once again houses a freely elected parliament. But scattered throughout the city are small brass plaques called Stolperstein, stumbling stones. Each one marks a house where a victim of the Holocaust once lived. Each one bears a name, a birth date, and the date and place of death. There are over 75,000 of these stones across Europe now, a way of ensuring that the victims are remembered individually, not just as statistics. Because that's one of the most important lessons of Hitler's story. Evil doesn't just happen all at once. It happens gradually. It happens when good people convince themselves that they can work with bad people to achieve good ends. It happens when citizens give up their responsibility to think critically and just follow the crowd. Hitler didn't seize power in Germany. It was given to him by politicians who thought they could control him, by citizens who thought someone else would deal with the problems, by ordinary people who convinced themselves that extreme times required extreme measures. In German schools today, students spend considerable time studying the Nazi period, not just memorizing dates and names, but really grappling with the questions that matter. How could this happen? How could so many people be complicit in such evil? What warning signs should we watch for? These students visit concentration camps. They meet with Holocaust survivors. They read the testimonies of perpetrators and victims alike. They're forced to confront the uncomfortable truth that the people who carried out these crimes weren't monsters. They were humans. Humans who made choices. Bad choices. And maybe that's the most important lesson of all. The capacity for both good and evil exists in all of us. Civilization is just a thin veneer over our darker impulses. It requires constant vigilance, constant effort, constant choice to maintain. Hitler's story isn't just about one madman who seized power in Germany 80 years ago. It's about the eternal struggle between our better angels and our worst instincts. It's about the price of political apathy. It's about the danger of surrendering our individual moral responsibility to charismatic leaders who promise simple solutions to complex problems. Let me take you back to that bunker one last time. May 2nd, 1945, 2 days after Hitler's suicide. The last of the bunker's inhabitants have either fled or died. Soviet soldiers are exploring the abandoned complex, shining flashlights into corners where some of history's darkest decisions were made. The conference room where Hitler raged at his generals is empty now. The dining room where Eva Braun tried to maintain normalcy is silent. The bedrooms where the Goebbels children spent their final nights are cold and still. But if those concrete walls could speak, what stories they would tell. Stories of a man who convinced himself he was a god and discovered he was all too human. Stories of followers who chose loyalty over sanity. Stories of children who paid the price for their parents' delusions. The bunker had been Hitler's refuge, but it became his tomb. He had retreated there to escape reality, but reality followed him down. The man who had spent his career denying the humanity of others ultimately had his own humanity stripped away by the evil he had embraced. Those 105 days underground. They're a perfect metaphor for Hitler's entire career, aren't they? A gradual descent into darkness. Each step seemed logical at the time. Each decision seemed justified by circumstances. But looking back, we can see the steady progression from disappointed artist to genocidal dictator to madman cowering in a hole in the ground. And what about us? What do we take from this story? I think it's this: democracy is fragile. Human rights are fragile. The values we consider sacred can be destroyed by people who promise to protect them. The price of freedom really is eternal vigilance. Hitler succeeded because too many people thought someone else would stop him. Too many people thought the system would protect itself. Too many people believed that it couldn't happen in their civilized, educated, modern society. But it did happen. And it could happen again anywhere, anytime people stop paying attention, stop thinking critically, stop holding their leaders accountable. The bunker is gone now, buried under parking lots and apartment buildings. Hitler's body has been destroyed completely. His empire lasted only 12 years. His 1,000-year Reich became a historical footnote. But the lessons remain, written in the testimonies of survivors, preserved in the archives of history, taught in classrooms around the world, remembered by anyone who understands that the price of forgetting the past is being condemned to repeat it. I want to end with an image that gives me hope. It's a photograph taken in Berlin in 1989 as the wall was coming down. In the foreground, you can see pieces of concrete being smashed by happy crowds. In the background, barely visible, is the area where Hitler's bunker once stood. The contrast is perfect, isn't it? Where once there was a symbol of division and oppression, there were now people celebrating unity and freedom. Where once Hitler had planned the domination of Europe, ordinary citizens were choosing democracy and peace. That's the real victory over fascism. Not just military defeat, but the triumph of human dignity over human degradation. The triumph of hope over despair. The triumph of truth over propaganda. Hitler spent his final 105 days underground, cut off from light, cut off from reality, cut off from everything that makes life worth living. But above ground, even as Berlin burned, there were people choosing differently, choosing to help each other, choosing to preserve life rather than destroy it, choosing to build rather than tear down. And in the end, those are the people who won, not through superior firepower or better strategy, but through superior humanity. That's the lesson of those 105 days underground. Darkness is powerful, but it's not permanent. Evil can triumph for a time, but it contains the seeds of its own destruction. And as long as there are people willing to choose light over darkness, truth over lies, love over hate, then there will always be hope. Even in the deepest bunker, even in the darkest night, even when all seems lost, there will always be hope. 105 Days Underground. The Final Days of Adolf Hitler. A story of how the most powerful man in Europe became the most powerless. A story of how evil ultimately destroys itself. A story we must never forget and must never allow to be repeated. But here's what I need you to do right now. Look around you. Look at your world. Are there leaders asking you to stop thinking critically? Are there voices telling you that certain groups of people are less human than others? Are there politicians promising simple solutions to complex problems if you'll just give them more power? Because it's happening again. Maybe not exactly like it did in 1933, but the patterns are there. The warning signs are flashing. And most people are doing exactly what the Germans did. They're assuming someone else will deal with it. They're thinking it can't happen here. They're believing it can't happen now. Right now, as you're watching this, there are children in classrooms being taught to hate. There are politicians using emergency powers that they promise are temporary. There are citizens surrendering their freedoms because they're afraid. Just like the Germans were afraid in 1933. The bunker isn't just a place Hitler died. It's a state of mind. It's what happens when people stop questioning authority. It's what happens when we choose comfort over courage, safety over freedom, following over thinking. So here's my challenge to you. Don't just watch this video and move on. Don't just hit like and forget about it. Take action. Learn the warning signs of authoritarianism. Study how democracies die. Understand how ordinary people become complicit in extraordinary evil. And then, teach someone else. Share this knowledge. Because the only way we prevent another Hitler is if enough people recognize the signs before it's too late. I'm going to put a link in the description to a resource that lists the warning signs of fascism. Not because I want to scare you, but because I want to prepare you. Print it out. Share it. Use it as a checklist for any leader who asks for your blind loyalty. Remember those children in the bunker who died because their parents couldn't imagine a world without Hitler? Don't let that be your children. Don't let that be anyone's children. The choice is yours. You can scroll to the next video and pretend this is just ancient history. Or you can recognize that this story isn't over. It's still being written. And you get to help decide how it ends. What will you choose? Will you be the person who saw the warning signs and acted? Or will you be the person who watched democracy die and did nothing? The comments below are already filling up with people who get it. People who see the parallels. People who understand that this isn't just about Hitler. It's about us. It's about now. It's about the choice we make in the next 5 minutes. Share this video. Not because you want to go viral, but because you want to save lives. Because every person who learns these lessons is one more person who might recognize the danger when it comes to their doorstep. The bunker was Hitler's end, but it doesn't have to be ours. We can choose differently. We can choose better. We can choose to learn. But only if we act. Only if we share. Only if we refuse to let history repeat itself. Your move.